Hi everyone. So today is kind of a continuation from last lecture. Um, so last lecture we started talking about the problem of evil, and we talked about basically the atheists' presentation of that argument. And so today, as you've already read, we are going to talk about the Christian's response. And the reason we're talking specifically about the Christian response rather than a different theistic response is because, well, in the book, Eleanor Stump admits that she's talking from a Christian worldview. And it's because she is a Christian, and so she doesn't actually know that much about Judaism or Islam or anything like that. So since that's what's in the book, that's what we'll be dealing with. And also, I'm more familiar with that anyway, so I honestly don't know too much about... I know a little bit about Judaism, but not too much about Islam in regards to the problem of evil. So we'll just be focusing on the Christian response, and we'll talk about Stump's answer or solution, or attempt at solution. And then I'll give kind of another option for the Christian response. I hope you've been enjoying this reading. I haven't graded yet the responses, the critical summaries, but I will at some point before the end of the day Saturday. I like to at least get it done before the end of the week so that I don't get overwhelmed or anything, and so you get your grades back. Not that they're ever going to be that crazy. Most people will never get a failing grade or anything, so no need to stress about that. If you do have any questions about your grade though, or you read my comments and you're like, oh, that's actually not what I was saying, or something like that, just let me know and we can talk about it, figure it out. Let's see. Any other housekeeping things? I hope everybody is safe. I've gotten a few emails that, I guess I have students that have gotten COVID, so I hope that everyone is staying safe and doing well. And if you are one of those students and you are not doing well, then make sure you let me know so we can, figure something out. Anything else? No. But I did say on the first day that I might show you my dogs sometime, and they're right here, so I'll show you. Hold on. Come here, buddy. So this is my new puppy. He's 4 months old now, and his name is Packer. He's very sweet. And this one, he's a little heavier. He's older. He's 6.5. His name is Washer. He's very sweet too. He's a very sweet boy. So, yeah, whenever I am normally teaching in real life, then you get more anecdotes and stories about my personal life, so I thought I would give you a little insight. Normally, whenever I'm recording these, they just sit at my feet, and they're very good. They got their playing out this morning, so we're chilling now. Hopefully they don't go back to playing because they can be a little loud. So anyways, that's just a fun little thing. Yeah, so we'll just dive right in then. So Eleanor Stump, she is a professor. I shouldn't have woken them up. Now he's biting my hand. She's a professor at St. Louis University, which, fun fact, that I almost went there instead of the U of A. Stump is a medieval philosophy scholar, and that's what I like, so I was like, maybe that could work, but didn't want to move to St. Louis. Too far from family and stuff, so we didn't do that. Anyways, so I was kind of familiar with her before reading this, because whenever I was applying to schools, I was like, you have to look at who could be your potential advisor and stuff like that. So I watched some of her YouTube videos and stuff, and I was like, yeah, She seems alright, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, so I was a little familiar with her. So she's still alive. She's doing contemporary philosophy. Born in 1947, so maybe like the age of your grandparents or something like that. And yeah, she's a medieval scholar, and philosophy of religion obviously is her thing. So she writes a lot on the problem of evil. She writes a lot on Thomas Aquinas. So her school of philosophy is Thomism, which is named after Thomas Aquinas. So big into that, loves that. It was a horrible idea to wake up to Poppy. And this might seem unprofessional that I did this, but I really do like to, like, if I'm teaching a class, talk about, you know, each other's lives and stuff. So it feels like that's why I might maintain an unprofessional vibe, just because I want you to feel like we know each other, even though I don't know all of you quite so well, unfortunately, because of the circumstances. Okay, hopefully he'll stop eventually. Yeah, so that is Eleanor Stump, and I'm gonna link a YouTube video where she talks about this very topic, because to me it's actually more compelling than her writing. In the video, she spends time setting up the problem. So instead of just diving into like logic, stop. Thank you. Instead of diving into like logic and her response right away, she sets up the stage. And like I said with Antony from the last lecture, who changed the tone to be very emotionally compelling, Stump kind of does this in her video, where she starts by saying, before I give an answer, we should just talk about suffering, and how no matter what, even if I have a successful answer for the reason that there is suffering, we should still acknowledge that suffering is hard, and there's suffering everywhere, and no answer is going to make it go away. And that's a hard reality that we have to live with. So setting up the stage in that way makes you kind of feel connected to her in a sense. So I appreciated that more than this article on it. But so she starts by giving 4 things that Orthodox believers are committed to. So first, we get, as we are all familiar with at this point, that God is... I might need to write smaller because we're going to do more. I'll write smaller. So God is omnipotent. So that is number 1. All believers, Orthodox believe. Oh, and I should clarify. So when I say Orthodox, I know a while ago, like, if somebody said Orthodox, I would have thought, like, Greek Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox, like the thing you learn about in world history where, like, there was a split in some church. That's what I was thinking. Orthodox, in the way that we'll be using it, just means, like, aligns with traditional doctrine, isn't heretical, which would mean contrary to traditional doctrine. So things like God is omnipotent, God is omniscient, these are all Orthodox beliefs. Unorthodox means, like, contrary to Orthodox. Anyways, you can Google it if you want. I'm not explaining it that well, but basically just, so for Christianity, an Orthodox belief would mean a belief that aligns with, like, the traditional creeds of the past. So, like, the Nicene Creed talks about Jesus and being fully God, fully man. So that would be an Orthodox belief. So if you have an unorthodox or heretical belief, it would mean that maybe you believe that Jesus wasn't fully God or something like that. You get the Apostles' Creed, which goes through basically just the basic doctrines of the faith. And if you deny those, then you would not be an Orthodox believer. So, anyways, just so you know, because I will probably use that term as we go on. So, God is omnipotent. God is omniscient. And if you recall, omnipotent means all-powerful. Omniscient means all-knowing. Then 3, God is perfectly good. So that would be like omnibenevolent. So just by virtue of being a Christian, in Stump's case, these are things that you accept. And if you don't accept these, then maybe you should use a different term so that it's not confusing. Then the 4th one, there is evil in the world. The 4th one is more of an observational one. Well, and I guess the Bible talks about there being evil in the world. So those things you are committed to. And, of course, they pose a problem or a perceived problem. Seems like these might be logically incompatible. That's what Hume argues. And we talked about that last time, if you recall. Hume was one of the first to articulate it well, the problem of evil. Though it obviously has been around for forever. So, Stump also acknowledges that in order to show that these are actually incompatible, there has to be another added claim, that is, there is no morally sufficient reason for God to allow instances of evil. So in order for someone to show that these are incompatible, someone has to prove that there is no morally sufficient reason for God to allow instances of evil. So we'll go ahead and write 5 with a question mark, because she's going to try to disprove that. Because she would believe that there is morally sufficient reason for God to allow instances of evil. So this is what the atheist has to prove. That there is no morally sufficient reason for God to allow instances of evil. So, if you recall, Antony argued that very point. So, from last time, that is what Antony was arguing. So, Stump is just arguing the opposite. They're not like responding to one another specifically, but they're both doing opposite things. So Stump's goal is going to be to develop a solution of her own by presenting and defending a morally sufficient reason for God to allow instances of evil. And Stump's account is another example of a free will defense. So using free will as reason for there being evil in the world. All right, so she specifies that she's talking from a Christian point of view. And this is important because if you know that you are working from a certain viewpoint, you need to be upfront about it. Because if you just say, I'm going to prove God exists, and then only talk about Christianity, then that could be really confusing. Because someone would be like, yeah, I also believe God exists, but I'm not a Christian, I'm a Jew or a Muslim. So it's important to specify what you're actually talking about. Because if you don't, then your argument is much more likely to fail. But if you specify, like, hey, these are the parameters that I'm working under, it makes it more clear for everyone. So I appreciate that she does that. So she's giving a strictly Christian solution, attempted solution. So she says, since I'm a Christian, there are 3 more claims that I'm working with. So she's working with the sixth one, which is that Adam fell. So that would be a traditional belief in Christianity. Ooh. Once again, you can't see very good. Now you get a nice view of my midriff. Alright, then natural evil. Natural evil entered the world as a result of Adam's fall. And then the eighth one, which is a little long. Basically, after death, humans go to heaven or hell. I'm going to keep it short. After death, humans go to heaven or hell. So those are 3 more doctrines of the Christian faith that she's operating under. So before she can use those 3 claims to further her attempted solution, she needs to show that these are true. She doesn't need to show like that they're undeniably true, but just that they're justified beliefs. So, because if she just said like, just added these crazy claims and then used them to prove her point, then that would not be a very good argument, because people would be like, use these things that don't make any sense. So she has to show that these are not demonstrably false. So what she means by that is that she's not going to show that these are undeniably true. She's just going to show that you can't demonstrate that these are false. So these are just the basis for her argument. And it's clear that these are going to raise some questions by people. So, the eighth one that humans go to heaven or hell raises some questions from folks. So, the first question that it could raise is, if an omnipotent God could bring it about that all humans be in heaven, and if a God... Let me redo. If an omnipotent God could bring it about that all human beings be in heaven, and if a good God would want no human beings in hell, wouldn't a good omnipotent God bring it about that all human beings be in heaven? Basically, that was a lot of words to say, a very short thing, that wouldn't a good God have everybody go to heaven? Then the next question that this could bring about is, even if an omnipotent God does not bring it about that all human beings be in heaven, how could a good omnipotent God allow human beings to suffer torment in hell? So why would God send people to hell? That is a question you will hear all the time, or have heard all the time, in response to Christian faith. A lot of reasons for people not being Christians is because they don't understand how a good God could send people to hell. Then we get the third question, which is, how could a good, just God decree that some human beings suffer torment for an infinite time for evils done during a finite human lifetime? So, human beings make a mistake in their finite life. So how does that justify infinite torment? Is the question. And she answers this first by defining terms, which is always the best thing to do. So she she defines heaven as being a spiritual state of union with God. So rather than defining heaven as just like the best place that you can imagine, it is specifically dealing with God and union with God. So that's important because if you don't want to love God or want to be with God, then heaven would not be appealing to you. So you wouldn't choose to go have union with God, so you wouldn't choose heaven if you don't love God. So that's important. Then she also claims that God is not going to make you want him. So God's not going to force you to come to heaven and be with him if you don't want that, is her argument. So then she also defines hell as not a torture chamber. It's not like this fiery furnace of like getting beat all the time. It's actually, she says, that the essence of hell is the absence of union with God. So that's something that you would choose if you don't love God. This may be different than what we typically picture or have heard it to be. But she takes Dante's interpretation of hell. And I'm sure you've heard of at least Dante's Inferno. So his version of hell, or his understanding of hell, is that it's just absence of God. So it doesn't necessarily mean like absolute torment and torture all the time. It is that God is not there. So it's basically the thing that people choose anyways if they don't love God. So it's not that God is sending people to this horrible, horrible place. It's that God is allowing people to go where they want, she would say. So that kind of at least gives some clarity to the questions that arise from number 8. Let's see. So she argues that hell is the best possible place for those whose free wills are not in conformity with the divine will. So this is using free will to make her claim, saying that it's the best place for someone whose will is not in tune with the divine will. So that kind of sidesteps some of those problems of why would God send people to hell? Well, people choose to not be with God. And she does say, like, let's see, that it could be the case that God could just basically annihilate, meaning stop the existence of those who don't love him rather than sending them to this place of absence of him. But she uses this hidden premise that existence is better than non-existence. So living apart from God is going to be better than not living. That's kind of her argument. She doesn't spend much time there. I just found that interesting. Because you could just say, it just shouldn't exist then. I mean, it's up to you. I've never really thought much about whether existence in and of itself is a good thing or not. But something to think about. Alright, so now we're past those questions. Now we get to the question of number 6, which is Adam's fall. If you are unfamiliar with Christian doctrine, this is, I'm sure maybe you've heard of at least Adam and Eve. So I also don't want to speak down to you if you know this. But I'll just give a brief overview. I realize that maybe you know this, but also you might not. Who knows? So God created the world. He created the first people, which were Adam and Eve, and he tells Adam that they are allowed to have anything at all, except they're not allowed to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So then a serpent, or a little snake, comes up and tempts Eve and says, did God really say not to eat this fruit? And she basically just concedes and says, and eats the fruit. since Adam was given the command, Adam is the one where the judgment is the person who receives the responsibility for that. So that was the fall of mankind, according to Christianity. That and I'll talk about this a little later with the response that isn't stumps. What the Christian faith really views that as, because most people look at that and they'll say, so all of mankind fell because Adam and Eve ate a fruit. That's kind of crazy. So I'll explain that later. That's just like she's operating with that in mind, that Adam's fall. So let me finish what I was saying. Adam and Eve eat the fruit. Then after that, all human beings born afterwards inherit a sinful nature. Something that's interesting to me is that, from what I could tell, Stump doesn't say sin anywhere. I'm not sure if she refrains from using that because this is like a philosophical paper rather than a theological paper, but I thought that was interesting. She calls it a defect in the nature or the will. So all human beings after Adam and Eve have a defect in their will. The disposition of their will is toward evil rather than toward good. So she says that human beings are still capable of doing good, but the disposition, the orientation of their will is toward bad things. So that's important for her argument. It kind of explains why there's evil in the world, because humans have a will that is defective. So, Adam falls, then you get to 7, which is that natural evil entered the world as a result of Adam's fall. So, I am bent towards evil because I have inherited a sin nature. Oh, also, just interesting, Eleanor Stump is Catholic, so that's probably why she is adopting Dante's understanding of hell and stuff like that. So keep that in mind if you want. I don't know. It's interesting to me. I think it's important because it kind of explains some of her explanation. Yeah, so original sin is a doctrine accepted by the Catholic Church, but it is a little different than another doctrine of sin in Christian theology, which would be total depravity, which says that man cannot do anything good. So her version, or the Catholic version of original sin, is that there's like a disposition towards evil. This different Protestant or Reformed understanding of the will is that the will can't do anything good apart from God. Everything is evil that the heart does. So, and I'll explain that in a minute. Yes. So, this 6th one, that Adam fell, has 3 subpoints below it. At some point, so this is the first one. At some point in the past, as a result of their own choices, human beings altered their nature for the worse. So human beings chose that which is evil, and that choice altered the nature of all human beings. Then the alteration involved what we perceive and describe as a change in the nature of human free will. And the changed nature of the will was inheritable. So Adam's fall into sin, that original sin is inheritable by us. Which is why, Catholics believe in the, what do you call it? I shouldn't have even brought this up if I forgot what it was called. I got Google right here, so give me 2 seconds. What do you call... Anyway. Alright. Just, you know what? Just pretend I never even said anything because I can't remember. So anyways, human beings inherit original sin. It is inheritable. Then she just shows that nothing in evolution entails the falsity of this point. Because it might seem that this is not true, that a sin nature can be inheritable, but nothing actually proves that that's not true. That's kind of her point after that. All right, then we get to the next question that number 6 brings about, which is that couldn't God have prevented the human race from inheriting this evil inclination of will after Adam's fall by some miraculous intervention in human history, if necessary? So, couldn't God have stopped this bent or disposition of the will towards evil? Couldn't he have just, like when the Holocaust was happening, couldn't he have just said, like, no, stop? Then we get to the free will, where the free will defense is really operating. So God could have prevented this transmission of a defective will in a few different ways, but basically he would be interfering with free will at that point, and that makes free will not free will. So then it's a logical contradiction. Let's see. So we get 7, which is that natural evil, meaning like tornadoes, diseases, droughts, all of those things, after Adam's fall. So she kind of weakens number 7 by saying, instead of saying there were no diseases, tornadoes, droughts in the world until Adam's fall, she says no person suffered from diseases, tornadoes, droughts until Adam's fall. So she just says that the ways in which an omnipotent God might have brought about the weaker assumption are limited only by one's imagination, and there is no need to specify any of them here. So she kind of just sidesteps it, moves on. So now that she has, in her mind, defended the fact that 6 through 8, that those assumptions are rational to be held, now she's able to really move into her argument, which is just the free will defense. It's nothing particularly groundbreaking or anything, but it's kind of like the response to the problem of evil. So the problem of evil is something that we always hear, and any iteration of it is probably not going to be incredibly groundbreaking. Same for the response. It's kind of like these two camps are at an impasse. Like, there's probably never going to be a solution to the problem of evil that just like, whoa, that is convincing to everyone. And there's probably never going to be an iteration of the problem of evil that's like, whoa, that is convincing for everyone. It's just kind of is what it is. But you can give maybe Stump's account is more compelling than another account for you. So she talks about how free will, so Anselm talks about free will as like a as like a disease. Like, free will isn't a disease, but the will is like a disease. So a person's ability to get sick is not a strength, right? But a person's ability to get better or to not get sick is a strength. So if the will is doing evil, that is not a strength. It is not a strength for the will to will evil things. It is a strength for the will to will good things. So then, a free will would be a will that is disposed to the good. So, free will where you just like choose evil all the time, that's not actually free will. That's a will bent towards evil, not freedom. So, freedom is the good. And for someone like Stump, the good is defined by God. So she kind of says a lot, but the main point, she says a lot to say a little, you know how philosophers do. She says, if God and human beings will not fix the defect in their wills, what possible cure is there? So God can't fix the defect, can't like override someone's free will, she would say, and fix their will, because that would be a logical incompatibility or logical contradiction, because God can't make you will something. God can't make you use your free will in a certain way, because then it wouldn't be free will. So, and then the person is not going to fix the defect in their wills because they can't. So, what is the cure? The cure is to let a person will that God fix his defective will. So, what this reminds me of is in the Gospels when the guy says, oh Lord, help my he says, I believe, help my unbelief. So the Christian has to ask for God to fix their defective will. So that is the only way that a person can get away from their defective will, is to ask that God would fix their will. So in that way, they're using their free will, and God is also able to fix it, because humans can't fix it, only God can. So the human asks, that's a utilization of free will, then God fixes, a utilization of his power to fix. So then she talks about suffering, and how suffering can be the thing that leads someone to ask God to fix the defect in their will. And this would be like salvation. Once someone is saved, their will is changed to will good things rather than evil. Doesn't mean that people won't still sin, just means the disposition of their heart has been changed. So then we get to her final point, which solves the problem, of course. I'm just going to erase this so we can see. Almost there. All right, so we're at the 9th claim. So number 9. She has just proven, apparently, that because it is a necessary condition for union with God, the significant exercise of free will employed by human beings in the process which is essential for their being saved. Wow, sorry. This is taking a minute. From their own evil. Is of such great value that it outweighs all the evil of the world. All right. Let's say that fast now. Let's see if we can get this in frame. Excuse me, sir. Okay. So, because it is a necessary condition for union with God, the significant exercise of free will employed by human beings in the process which is essential for their being saved from their own evil is of such great value that it outweighs all the evil of the world. All right. So, basically, free will is what allows us to be saved from our evil nature. That is of such significance that it is of such great value that it outweighs all the evil of the world. So this is a response to number 5, which was that there is no morally sufficient reason for God to allow instances of evil. So this is supposed to be a morally sufficient reason for God to allow instances of evil. That's her argument. So, like I said, I'm going to link, it's like a 8-minute video that you can watch if you want, of her talking about suffering and evil. It's pretty interesting. Like I said, I appreciated it more than her actual argument. So, one reason that I find this particular argument to be maybe a little weak is because she's using parts of the Christian Bible, but not like fully committing to them. And so it all seems very unclear to me, a little vague. So we're going to look at Jonathan Edwards, who was a philosopher from the modern period, so 1700s. He was a Puritan. You may have heard of him in English class from reading Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, which a lot of people hate. But if you read more of his work, he's actually very loving and gentle. So I would recommend reading Edwards. Yep. So started the Great Awakening, not the Great Revival, in America. So he's actually one of the very first American philosophers, which is interesting. And he really commits to Christian theology for his answer to everything. So he believed in total depravity, which is that a human being inherits... Okay, let's start from the beginning. This is going to hopefully make it more clear. Because his answer is wrapped within a theologically Christian worldview. Stumps, to me, uses Christianity to get to her point. Edwards, everything is wrapped within an understanding of who God is. So I think, to me, that makes it more clear, because he's using the whole worldview of Christianity rather than just parts. So I think it's easier to understand. So in this understanding, and many people have believed what Edwards is saying, I'm just using him as kind of the mouthpiece because he's a famous philosopher. So, but there's, so many people that believe this, especially historically. So, like I said, Stump is coming from a Catholic understanding. Edwards is coming from a Reformed perspective, which would be the likes of Martin Luther, John Calvin, people like that, the Reformers. So, and also, the Reformers come from people like Augustine. So, anyways, it could be argued that people would say that Augustine is Catholic, but back then Catholic meant something entirely different than it does now. So, the Reformed faith would claim Augustine as a father of the faith and not Catholic in the sense that we would understand Catholicism now. So anyways, what I'm about to say is also true of Augustine, what Augustine believed. So, Adam was created. God created the world. God created Adam and Eve. And the first sin was not that they did something like, oh, they ate a fruit. That's really, really bad. They weren't supposed to do that. The reason that this sin had such great consequence was that an infinitely holy, good, just, merciful, all the things, God created this world and these people out of the kindness and mercy and grace of his heart, and as an overflow of his goodness. And the first people he created, he gave them everything, right? Everything they could possibly want. And he said, just this one thing, don't eat of this tree. One of the first things they do is disobey an infinitely good, holy, just God. So you might wonder, why are the consequences to one sin so dramatic? It's not that they created an infinite amount of sins. It's rather that the sin they committed was against an infinitely good and just and holy God. So Edwards's response to the problem of evil is different than Stump's because it's a lot stronger. Because Stump never explains why original sin is so bad. Edwards explains God is so holy, so just, so unlike humans, that for one sin to be committed against him demands an infinite response and punishment. So Edwards' response to the problem of evil is wrapped in the holiness of God. Stump's seems to lack that. So it doesn't really, to me, give a great argument for why this sin nature is inheritable. Edwards' response at least makes more logical sense to me, because an infinite sin, cosmic treason against God, demands punishment because God is so good. So I've heard this example that if someone murdered your child and the judge, you go to court stuff, and the judge says, we're not going to worry about it. Like, you're good to the murderer. Don't even worry about it. We're just going to sweep it under the rug. No big deal. There would be an outcry. It would be unbelievable that someone would do that. So if we look at God and say, why don't you just sweep that sin under the rug? That is not an option for a just judge, right? So these are the types of arguments that Edwards would be making. So that explains why we all have a sin nature. We're all born dead in our trespasses as a result of Adam being the federal head. So then we need, like, Stump doesn't include Jesus or the cross in her explanation, which I think to have a Christian response and to not have Christ is a little confusing. So for Edwards, Jesus comes in and he's the mediator between the holy and just God and the wicked man. And then we can have union with God. So, anyways, I'm explaining all this. It might not seem relevant to the actual problem of evil, but this is the worldview that Edwards' response is wrapped in. So, humans have a bent, not only a bent towards evil, but everything they do is apart from God unless they're regenerated by the Holy Spirit through Christ. So, you can't do good because you don't love God in and of yourself. In order to love God, you have to love Christ, who allows you to have union with God. So, and this explains why there is evil in the world, right? But then we get to like specific instances, like suffering. It has kind of a different, kind of demands a different response. So that's why there's evil in the world, right? But something really traumatic happening. You can't just say, or it's not wise to just say, like, oh, that's because like humans are just evil, and so sorry that your child died, but there's just people are just bad. Because in Edwards' worldview, God is sovereign, meaning that God is in control of anything and everything. He has ultimate power over everything. So, you have to explain why God would allow that to happen. If God is sovereign, can't he just, sweep it under the rug? But can't he just fix it? So in that case, you end up getting a similar response to Stump's. It's more full because you have the background of the Christian worldview in it. And maybe Stump would have done that had she had more time, but even in her video, she doesn't really do that. Give you an explanation for why sin is so evil. So anyways, I thought I would give you just another perspective from Jonathan Edwards. And a lot of that isn't just from like one particular work of his. If you read The Freedom of the Will, that is great. And yeah, you could read that. You could read The Religious Affections. Any of those would be great resources to get that sort of perspective on the problem of evil. Yeah, so I hope that was helpful in some sense. So that this was just the Christian response to the problem of evil. If you want to write about that, you totally should. You could take Stump's view and defend it against maybe what Louise Antony would say. You could take Stump's view and reject it based on Louise Antony's argument. You could take Stump's view and make it stronger if you see that it lacks in some area. Lots of different options. So, this concludes our Existence of God lectures. Next week we're going to talk about belief. Are we justified when we believe in God or whatever? So that should be fun. If you have any questions at all, need any help with anything, let me know. I didn't go super in depth on Edwards' theodicy, but if you want to hear more from that perspective, let me know. And yeah, so I hope y'all have a good weekend, and like I said, I will grade your papers by the end of Saturday, and that should be great. Thanks for listening, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.